With us from the Democratic Progressive Caucus, co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, is Mark Pocan. Eduardo Maura is with the Spanish organization Podemos. And my first question to you, Eduardo, is how do you describe what Podemos is?
We launched Podemos in 2014. There was a huge wave of discontent in Spain coming from 2011, and we had to make a decision, and we decided to create a political party to stand in elections.
What was your entryway into working with Podemos?
I was part of the student movement when I was in college. And then I got very interested in politics at the grassroots level. And when the time came and when the opportunity arose, I decided to found this party. I'm one of the co-founders of Podemos.
And how about you, Mark? I don't think I've ever asked you how you got involved in political work.
Oh, I think it was my dad. He was in local government, so I was doing doors at 8. So,
knocking on them?
Yeah, knocking on them, walking around with my dad, and it goes back a little ways too.
Talk a bit, you first, Mark, about your experience of going from, well, at the one level, a state activist and a state representative to being in Washington. It's been a year since we've checked in with you about that. How is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, and what a year to do it, right? A year of Donald Trump is like 7 years. It's like dog years, right? For everybody having to endure this much activity. But it's been great for the movement because clearly, you know, people around the country are upset with what's going on. The energy is all on the progressive movement. It's on our side. So it's just a matter of making sure that, you know, the leaders are following the people. And if we do that, I think, you know, we're going to be in a good place this fall to try to change things around. A lot of people realized staying home in 2016 wasn't a good idea, and now it's the progressive movement where the energy's at, and I think, you know, we're well poised to, when we get some control, to actually advance positive legislation instead of just fighting everything we've had to fight with Donald Trump.
And you, Eduardo, in terms of what you're grappling with, how has it changed over the last few years?
Between 2011 and 2015, there was a very progressive agenda in Spain, in Southern Europe, and we took advantage of that, both in the streets and in the ballot box. But since 2015, there's been two, let's say, up and down years with more conservative issues on the agenda. 2018, this year, is kind of a crossroads year for us. It's on one side, the feminist movement, very powerful in Spain. I think it's turning things around. And also people who have problems with retirement plans. In Spain, most people have government-funded retirement plans. And they haven't have a raise in their income in the last 6 years. And now they are just facing a huge problem because inflation is going up.
What sort of changes have you had to make internally to address those challenges?
We had a few internal debates. What do we do? Do we try to convince people of breaking with the past, breaking with the status quo? Or do we try to provide them with new progressive certainties? This is kind of a debate. In a very developed country like the US, like Spain, like France, like any European country, you need people to imagine themselves having a job, raising their children in a country basically ruled by your progressive policies. It's very important to provide people with certainties, different alternative certainties. And I think this internal debate was very useful, hard, of course, as any internal debate, but very useful, and I hope it makes us stronger.
So how are we doing on the the alternative certainties on the Democratic front?
Healthcare in this country right now is sort of a mess, and it's getting messier because of the Trump administration. Can we sell well, what if we were like, you know, pretty much every other industrialized pure country and had healthcare for our citizens? Wouldn't that be a better system? And I think that's part of our challenge, is to make sure that people can really understand that there is that alternative. It's not just, you know, death of 1,000 cuts to healthcare by Donald Trump and, you know, 83% of the money of the tax bill in 10 years going to the top 1%, that the other 99% of us matter.
There have been a lot of moments in the United States that have felt like great solidarity moments. Internally, how does the Democratic Party actually consider those moments?
No, it's a great point. So I used to have a bumper sticker that I'm going to put on my car again because I keep saying it, which is, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. And I think this is what's happening in all these special elections. There are 39 state legislative seats since Donald Trump got elected that have flipped from Republican to Democrat, and only 4 the other direction. So clearly, there's a movement. And so I think we're at a point where, again, people are ahead of us. Whether or not the Democratic Party catches up to where they are at and convinces them to ride with us on this ride is the real question. But so far, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing through these electoral successes.
And you being here at this gathering, Eduardo, what are you seeing? What's of interest to you of what's going on here among the progressive Democrats?
Well, many things, because firstly, what the Trump administration is doing has had a great impact upon the rest of the world. I mean, it's changing the European agenda as well.
How so?
For instance, we've had this CETA voting in Congress in Spain 3 months ago, and you know this trade agreement with Canada is of paramount importance for us because it changes the way society works. It provides big companies with actually privatized courts. When you get to this debate in a country like Spain, quite far from the US, you get the feeling that being against CETA means Trump being against TTIP. So you are in favor of a closed society, you are against trade. And you can't be for trade but against these trade agreements anymore. And this is making things harder for us. So we feel for you. We are sympathetic to the fight you're putting up, but we also need you to change the agenda with Trump in office. Well, we need it now because it's having a great impact.
And how is the party dealing with bringing back into the fold Trump voters with a different kind of message than his?
So first of all, he won Wisconsin by 23,000 votes because of the issue of trade. On the top line, what he said resonated with a lot of people. The real problem is his trade plan is based on xenophobia. It's not based on labor standards or the ISDS provisions or things that I think we care about as a people. His are just based on he doesn't like foreigners, it's America first. Occasionally he can do something that looks correct even though it's for all the wrong reasons, and then we have to explain to people why the reasoning still is wrong and what we've got to do to actually have a fair trade policy that respects the labor and environmental standards and keeps the sovereignty through the courts so that you can protect yourself against a corporation otherwise that has a super judicial process. But it is tricky, it's difficult. We need to make sure that people really understand that. I think they get it in their gut. But we have to just really make sure we're conveying those alternative progressive policies that show that you can have family supporting policies that put money in your pocket and you can have opportunity for your kids. And if we do that, we have far more alternatives that actually work.
Eduardo, at what point did you all decide to start a new party and not just try to push the one that you had?
In Spain, we were used to have this two-party system, very strong party system, with other parties around, like supporting them, either conservative or left-wing. But we had the Conservative Party and the Socialist Party. The thing is that with the economic crisis, with the moral crisis that came along with the economic crisis, and also with the social change that Spain was going through, we thought that this two-party system had fallen in such disrepute that there was like a crack in the system. We thought there was a regime crisis, let's say, and we decided to take advantage of this crack and kind of get in by creating this party. And now we are polling at 2021, and we have won 8 mayoral races in Spain, including Madrid and Barcelona, which we hope to keep in 2019.
What was the final thing that was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back for you when you talk about the rottenness, the moral crisis? What was it?
The combination between corruption on one side, a huge, very deep social crisis, and the Indignados movement in 2011.
What we certainly see is the influence of these big corporations and big special interests who use money through campaigns, essentially. Now, what's interesting is in the past, often we've seen on campaign finance reform, people said they understand a corporation is going to lobby for their best interest, which is to make a profit. But most recent polling we've seen, it's really changed. People understand that the special interest influence in Washington, especially under someone like Donald Trump, is almost what they would call corrupt. And we're getting to a point where now you can run against pharmaceutical companies, and you can run for antitrust reform, and you can run on these concepts that weren't really conversations we had even a couple years ago in this country.
And is there ever a litmus test for you in this moment, with all this organizing, with this energy, with these candidates coming up? Is there a litmus test on the Democratic establishment beyond which you might go into a place like the one that Eduardo found himself in?
You know, we've seen some third-party efforts, which are always difficult, right? Especially when there's two established parties, and we've seen some tries, and we've never really seen that happen. Our argument that I have, and you know, we try to put it out there all the time, is people should join the party and take over their local parties and take over the Democratic Party. So if they're not happy with how it works in their local community or their state, then take it over. And there are so many people who are active right now. We had that women's march right after Donald Trump got elected, and in Madison, Wisconsin in January, which it can be very cold, we had nearly 100,000 people come out. These are the movements we're seeing right now, and I think it's easier to channel it into the existing structure. And if we do that, come November, if we take the majority, we're positioned to put those policies forward.
But there isn't a beyond the pale thing that the Democratic establishment would do that would just exasperate.
In fact, just the opposite right now. The Democratic Party is actually, everyone wants to be more progressive. You know, suddenly everyone wants to be in our movement. We just have to make sure that we control the movement. We're listening to the people, because that's the most important. And right now I feel very positive about it.
Great talking with you. You can find out more about all of this work at our website. That's lauraflanders.com. Mark Pocan, Eduardo Maura, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.